Hello everyone, Troy Eckard here with Eckard Land and Acquisition. This is another one of our videos regarding our educational process and our video to help you understand how mineral rights work. Today we're going to be talking about the proverbial question, why 180 days does it take for me to get revenue off of wells that are drilled on my minerals? Why does it take 180 days to see the cycle begin and commence? So I'm going to walk you through a life cycle of a typical horizontal well drilled in the Anadarko Basin. In each one of these phases across the various months from January to December in my example, I'm going to explain to you what goes on, what happens, so you can better understand the process which makes you tranquila and relax and know multi-billion-dollar oil companies are working as fast as they can to make money for their own company, at the same time make money for us as royalty owners in the minerals that they've leased. Let's use an example. Let's say in January, Eckard Land and Acquisition buys a mineral acre and we recognize it has permits filed. In our financial model, we're going to show you, here's the wells that are already online producing. Here are some wells we know have been filed of public record that have been permitted to be drilled. We then use the financial model and we forecast a sequence of events based on historical pattern when those permitted wells will actually generate and provide revenue to you and I as mineral owners. Let's walk you through it. If I file a permit in January, I've made a public record I intend on pooling certain mineral acres within sections of land in the Anadarko Basin. Got to give a public notice. At that time, the OCC approves the permit based on that public notice and says, oil company, you now have a permit that's approved. In the meantime, while that permit is going through the process, the oil company turns over to the operations team, start making the location, start building your pad site, start getting things ready to go. So when we get that permit stamped and approved, we can start drilling. About March or April, let's say 90 days into the process after the permit, they're going to commence drilling the well or wells. So let's say it's a 3 or 4 well permit, which is normally what we see on the minerals that we buy. They're going to go out and have a location that's equipped and set up to handle the drilling of one well back to back, 50, 60 feet apart, going out horizontally 2 miles, using the same equipment, the same crews, and it becomes a manufacturing process. And they may sit on that location for 60 to 75 days as they drill one well back to back on the same pad site. Once they drill the well, or the wells, they then release that equipment, and then comes the production team. The production team comes in and says, well, now let's put a fence around the location, let's put tank battery, well heads, let's put all the equipment, the gas systems, everything in place. Let's hook up the midstream. Let's figure out where the water is going to go, the gas is going to be collected. So a lot of work goes on the location after the wells have been drilled. Once the equipment and all the surrounding infrastructure is put in place, a frac is scheduled. Now remember, there's a shortage of crews, there's a shortage of equipment, and of course there is certain frac companies that we see the majors like to use. They want to use the premier companies. So you kind of get yourself in line and you wait. Well, when they start to frac the wells, they typically will frac all of the wells back to back, just like they drilled them back to back. So whatever that start date is for the frac, that commences what we believe to be the actual beginning of the flowback or the production, because once they frac it and they overpressurize the reservoir, they then want to open it up and flow it back, clean the well out from the sand and water injected, and let us start producing oil and gas. So if they frac in June, they may flow back at the end of July. I'm just using a time frame for an example. The flowback means we've overpressurized it, we open the valves, we're dumping a lot of salt water, a lot of water that we injected into the water tanks, and now we start seeing a changeover. High water, little oil, and as things begin to converse, the water goes down, oil and gas goes up. Now we're ready to turn it to sales. So we might turn it to sales in this example in August. Now we have the first month of production, meaning we're selling barrels of oil, we're selling molecules of gas down the pipeline. We now have a third-party buyer who's buying the oil, buying the gas, buying the natural gas liquids, and all during the month of August, those barrels, those molecules are being sold to a third party. About the end of September, the buyer of the oil says, look, I'm going to send you a check because oil's pretty easy. It's quantity, whatever the spot price is for oil. Here's your check or checks at the end of the month for the oil that we purchased. About October, we're going to get our second check from the oil. We're going to get our first check for gas. Why does gas lag? Gas has byproducts, butanes, propanes, natural gas liquids. They have to take it, process it, treat it, and then they got to create a value for each one of those components to settle up or shore up the value of the gas because it's super rich. So you get the oil check first, you get your second oil check, and then you get your gas. All during the process from August to October, the oil company is doing what they call title verification. Who owns the interest? Who owns the minerals? Send it to the land department. The land department creates a division of interest. The accounting department recognizes there's not just one well, but there's 4 wells. All the owners are lined out because at the end of the day, the oil company who's leased the mineral is 100% responsible fiduciarily for every penny that is dispersed or collected off that well. They are the fiduciary in charge of the property. They're going to take that 90 days and do everything they can to check title and clear who the ownership deck is. And once they get that done, they're going to take the check that they've been getting for the oil for the first 2 months and the gas, and they're going to prepare that check to go to Eckard, because Eckard is shown on the ownership deck as an owner of minerals within the unit that has been drilled and developed with the previous wells. About the end of November, somewhere between November the 5th and November the 20th, depending on every oil company, we will get a check. We internally have our own Eckard owner's deck. Thank you for the $1 million. Here's the different properties. Here's the different wells. Who owns it? We go through all of our portfolios. We have an accounting deck. We decide who owns what and what proportionate share. Then we send out our checks either the 10th of the month for the first distribution, or our standard revenue runs are always the 25th of every month. Once you get into pay, which pay means cash to us, that cash then goes to you. Once we're in pay, it happens every single month on the 25th of every single month. So I get a lot of clients saying, well, if the wells were online June the 1st, why don't I get a check a month later? Why don't I get a check 2 months later? Especially with older wells that are already online and producing. Because here's why. It still takes about 3 or 4 months for these companies to get a stamped deed title of our ownership that's been stamped in the courthouse. It goes to their land department, who has to take 30 to 45 days to approve it, that it's truly a transfer that's been legally done. They then hand it to accounting, and accounting says, we got to know when that effective date was of that owner transfer. Oh, it was done as of May the 1st. So Eckard may have bought it in June, but the effective ownership was May the 1st. We got to go back and do reverse accounting to give Eckard and their partners full credit for all the oil and gas. It takes 30 to 60 days in the accounting department to reverse, re-enter, and catch up with the revenue. I'm going to end up this little educational series on this comment. When you talk about 4 wells being drilled on your minerals, we're talking between $30 and $50 million worth of construction, development, and processing, and we're talking in less than 12 months from the time it's permitted to you have money. I dare you to show me one real estate project you have that can kick out revenue within 12 months. I dare you to show me where you can take virtually no risk and no capital cost and end up with a net cash flowing asset and do it in 12 months. When we buy the minerals, we buy probably a third to half of all the minerals you acquire in a portfolio already have producing wells, meaning you're making income from day one. And then the model is predicated on knowing we have permits, wells that have been drilled, they just haven't been fracked. So we sometimes buy minerals where permits are in place, and we know the sequence is 12 to 18 months. A lot of times we'll buy it where there's vintage wells, or maybe they're already drilled and they just need to be fracked. We've shaved off 50% of the time lapse to accelerate the revenue, which is what we call front-loaded income-producing minerals. I just thought today would be nice to show you kind of an example of the timeline that we deal with, and I want to remind you, these are the highest quality, most financially well-balanced oil companies on the planet Earth managing our minerals for free, and we get a free ride. I can't ask Oventive, Continental, Marathon, or anybody else to work any harder, any more efficiently, and do any better results than what we get. And so if I've got to wait 180 days, if I've got to wait 9 months to get my check, and they go all the way back to the first day my wells were producing, and they pay me every dime and never ask a dime from me, ladies and gentlemen, we are blessed. And that is exactly why buying minerals with Eckard makes so much sense. I'm Troy Eckard. Thanks for listening to me. I hope this helped you.